Hello, it's Reviews Day Tuesday, and today it's time for Discworld Discourses, my new YouTube series in which I talk about all of the Discworld books by Terry Pratchett. Today it's my first proper review of Discworld Discourses, and I am going to be reviewing The Colour of Magic, the first book in the series. This book was first published in 1983. The story begins in Ankh-Morpork, the biggest city on the Discworld. We meet Rincewind, the sort of wizard who is hired as a tour guide by Twoflower, a rich and naive insurance clerk from the Agitaean Empire with a very interesting traveller's chest, who is the Disc's first tourist. Adventures ensue, which include bar fights, dryads, Huron the Barbarian, quite a lot of dragons, and becoming human sacrifices. I think this is my fourth time reading The Colour of Magic. The first time, I'm not even sure if I got through the whole thing. I was reading it at uni. It was my first Discworld book. I didn't get on too well with it, and it discouraged me from reading the Discworld series anymore. It was pretty much my first experience of reading a fantasy novel, I think. It was a lot to take in. And I didn't really take it in. The second time was a few years later, and I had decided to give the Discworld series another go. I had got several of the later Discworld books out from the library and had really liked them, so I was far more invested in the world and the characters at that point, and it wasn't quite so much of a jumping into the deep end sort of situation. And I also had far more experience of fantasy novels then too. The third time I had already read pretty much all of the Discworld series, but was trying to reread it in publication order because I had read it very, very randomly. And the fourth time is now. That's my relationship with The Colour of Magic, if you wanted to know. I did not get on well with this book the first time I read it. I wasn't used to having to learn about an entire new world when I started a book. When I returned to it later, I was much better versed in fantasy as a genre and in Discworld as a series. And the more I have read The Colour of Magic, the more I have liked it as a book. The more I have enjoyed the characters and the story, and seeing how Discworld and Terry Pratchett as a writer have progressed over the years. I'd be very interested in hearing about other people's experiences of first reading The Colour of Magic, whether that is right now or whether you read it first years ago, and how different levels of experience with the genre and with Discworld affects that first reading of The Colour of Magic. Because I now find this book exciting and funny and interesting, when before I found it overwhelming and confusing and even a little bit boring. I would still say that The Colour of Magic is not one of my favourite Discworld books. I find it to be one of the ones which takes the longest for me to read. I don't find it the easiest read. It doesn't engross me as many of the others do, and I wouldn't find it a particularly great example of a Discworld novel either. Most of the other books are quite different, especially the later ones. The style and the voice develop over the years. The world expands and gets more depth and more lore. If the Discworld series had continued in this vein over the course of 41 books, I wouldn't be sitting here making a review series of them. I wouldn't be wanting to read them over again. A lot of this sounds like I am hating on The Colour of Magic. I'm not. There's a lot to recommend it. I'm sure plenty of people love it. I'm sure that when I read it again in 5 years or so, I'll like it more than I do now. But I wouldn't call it the finest example of a Discworld book or the finest example of Terry Pratchett's work, which I think is why it's generally recommended to not start reading the Discworld series with the first book in the series. A lot of people, including me, recommend starting later on in the series and then going back to the beginning. But then lots of people do start reading with The Colour of Magic and continue reading in publication order and have a wonderful time. So you do you. If you liked reading The Colour of Magic, I would very much recommend reading The Light Fantastic next, which is of course its sequel. I think The Colour of Magic is the only Discworld book, if I remember correctly, with a strict sequel. Or you could also try some other Rincewind books, like Eric, Interesting Times, or Unseen Academicals maybe. If you didn't like The Colour of Magic, however, I'd probably recommend doing what I did and jumping to one of the later Discworld books, especially one of the standalone books where you don't really feel like you're missing anything at all by not being well versed in the world and the characters already. The one I went with was The Truth, which is still one of my favourites and I'd recommend it, but another good one could be Moving Pictures, which is a little bit earlier on in the series. But let me know if you have any other suggestions for books that are good for people to read if they didn't like The Colour of Magic, or if they did like it. Now on to trivia. I said I was going to include a little bit of trivia in my Discworld Discourses videos. We'll see how it goes. The Colour of Magic is one of the few Discworld books to be split up into sections or chapters, the others being Pyramids, Going Postal, Making Money, and also the books for younger readers, so The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents and the Tiffany Aching stories. The Colour of Magic is one of the Discworld books to be made as a graphic novel, and it was also adapted as a video game. Sky released a 2-part TV adaptation of The Colour of Magic and The Light Fantastic in 2008. It starred David Jason as Rincewind and Sean Astin as Two Flower, and it's worth a look. It's not my favourite of the Sky Discworld adaptations, but I would say that it's worth a look. Maybe I'll revisit all of the Sky adaptations as part of Discworld Discourses. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in over the course of this series. The Colour of Magic is the first of the Rincewind novels, the others being The Light Fantastic, Sorcery, Eric, Interesting Times, The Last Continent, The Last Hero, and Unseen Academicals. As the first book in the Discworld series, The Colour of Magic features the first appearance of several characters who will be prominent in the Discworld series in future. I don't want to go into spoilers, but they include Rincewind and Death, and the Patrician as well, although I guess more as a job than as a character, because I think we have different Patricians up until Sorcery. So let me know what you think about the trivia bit, and if you think I should continue to include it. So those are my thoughts on The Colour of Magic. I would love to know what you think about this book. I will give it 3.8 out of 5. It goes up about 0.2 every time I read it. So that's it for the first proper episode of Discworld Discourses. The series will be continuing on the first and third Tuesday of every month, and as such, in my next Discworld Discourses, I will be reviewing The Light Fantastic, and that will be on the 5th of February, so 3 weeks from today. It's one of the few 3-week gaps that we'll be experiencing over the course of this series due to how dates work, so we've got a little bit of time to read the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Let's move across to the end screen. If you would like to see my latest video or some more Discworld Discourses videos, then you can do so below me here, and you can also subscribe to my channel or visit my website if you should wish to beside me here. Also, there will be a link in the description below to the full list of Discworld books and when I am currently planning on reviewing them on this channel. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you soon.